The rise and fall of Mickey Thompson, from land speed, king, to murder mystery, that shocked racing. In 1960, a guy who worked the night shift at a newspaper climbed into a car he built in his garage, pointed it at the horizon, and drove 406 miles per hour. He became the fastest man alive that morning. 28 years later, he was shot dead in his own driveway. The killer got away with it for almost 2 decades. This is the story of Mickey Thompson. To understand Mickey, you need to understand Southern California in the late 1940s. The war was over. Thousands of young men came home with mechanical skills. They learned fixing tanks and aircraft engines overseas, and they had no idea what to do with themselves. So they did what young men with too much energy and not enough sense have always done. They started racing, dry lake beds, back roads, anywhere flat and empty. Hot rodding was born in the garages of suburban Los Angeles, and it was equal parts ingenuity, recklessness, and cheap surplus parts. Marion Lee Thompson, who everyone called Mickey, was born in Alhambra, California in 1928. His father was a police captain. His sister was Collene. He grew up restoring old Fords and Chevrolets in the family garage, accumulating the kind of hands-on mechanical knowledge that no university could teach. After high school, he took a job as a pressman at the Los Angeles Times. He'd worked that job for a decade. But the night shift gave him his days free, and Mickey Thompson used every one of them. He started drag racing on weekends. Then it wasn't just weekends anymore. In 1953 and 54, he entered La Carrera Panamericana in Mexico, a border-to-border sedan rally widely considered the most dangerous race in the world. During one run, spectators wandered onto the course. Thompson swerved to avoid a child, lost control, and his car rolled into the crowd. 5 people were killed. The race was so deadly overall that Mexican officials canceled it after 54. Thompson carried that weight for the rest of his life. It didn't slow him down. If anything, it sharpened him. He became obsessive about preparation, about controlling every variable he could. By 1955, he'd become the first drag racer to exceed 120 miles per hour in the quarter mile. He beat his own record that same year, pushing past 150. That same year, he talked his way into managing the brand-new Lions Club-associated drag strip in Long Beach. He sold tickets, ran concessions, directed crowds, officiated races, and still found time to design what's generally considered the first slingshot dragster, the configuration that put the driver behind the rear axle. He also invented the Christmas tree starting light system that replaced the old flag person method. Every drag strip in the world still uses a version of it. He gave hot rodders night races, grudge matches, events that actually felt like events. He understood spectacle before he could even spell the word. So let's take stock. The man was simultaneously working the night shift at a newspaper, managing a drag strip, running a muffler shop, designing race cars, and setting speed records. He managed the Lions strip until 1964, nearly a decade, while holding down the Times job, and somehow finding time to build land speed cars in his garage. He slept when he could, which apparently wasn't much. But drag racing wasn't enough. Nothing was ever enough for Mickey Thompson. In 1950, at 21 years old, he'd made his first trip to the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah, driving a flathead-powered 1936 Ford Coupe. The place got into his blood. He came back in 51 and 52 with modified cars, each one faster than the last. And somewhere during those trips, staring out across that vast white emptiness, he made a decision that would define his life. He was going to break the land speed record. Now, the land speed record in the 1950s belonged to the British. It had belonged to the British for decades. Sir Malcolm Campbell and his Bluebirds, John Cobb and his Railton Mobile Special. These were gentlemen racers backed by the full resources of the English motor industry. Cobb's record stood at 394 miles per hour, set in 1947. It seemed untouchable. Mickey Thompson was not a gentleman racer. He was a pressman from Alhambra with grease under his fingernails and a checking account that couldn't cover a used motorcycle. But he had something the British didn't. He was completely, unreasonably stubborn. In 1958, Thompson and his collaborator Fritz Voigt built a twin-engined streamlined dragster powered by two Chrysler motors. The front engine faced backward to power the front wheels. The rear engine sat conventionally. It hit 294 miles per hour, fast but not fast enough. If two engines weren't going to get the job done, Thompson figured four would. So he did what any reasonable person would do. He drew the outline of a car on his garage floor with chalk. Then he started building it. Challenger 1. 4 Pontiac 415 cubic-inch engines, each connected to a 1937 Cadillac transmission. All 4 transmissions controlled by a single lever. The front pair of engines faced backward to drive the front wheels. The rear pair faced forward to drive the back wheels, four-wheel drive. The whole thing was wrapped in a streamlined body so tight that his crew had to physically push him down into the cockpit like stuffing a cork into a bottle. It weighed close to 5,000 pounds. He built it with his own hands, his family, and his friends. Every dime of his savings went into the car. The first attempt came in 1959. The car hit 363 miles per hour. A class record, but not the number he wanted. Thompson went home and made changes. He added a 671 GMC supercharger to each of the 4 Pontiac engines, boosting the output to around 700 horsepower per motor. That's 2,800 horsepower total, from 4 junkyard engines and 4 Depression-era transmissions. September 9, 1960, Bonneville Salt Flats. The sun was barely up. The salt stretched to the horizon in every direction, white and flat and featureless, like driving on the surface of another planet. Mickey Thompson strapped on a crash helmet, motorcycle leathers, goggles, and an oxygen mask that made him look like a fighter pilot from a decade earlier. His crew pushed him down into the sardine can cockpit. He could barely move. The roll cage was inches from his shoulders. The steering wheel was practically in his chest. He fired the engines, all 4 of them, and the sound was something between a thunderstorm and a building collapse. And he drove into history, 406.6 miles per hour, about the same speed as a bullet from a small caliber pistol. The fastest any American had ever traveled on land, the fastest any human had traveled on wheels. He'd broken John Cobb's record that had stood for 13 years. Mickey Thompson, the night shift pressman from Alhambra, was the fastest man in the world. Newsreels carried the footage across the country. It was 1960, the last great age of black and white news film, and Mickey Thompson was suddenly a household name for about 30 minutes. Because to make it official, you need 2 runs, an out and a back. And on the return run, a drive shaft failed. Some say it was actually one of the Pontiac engines that let go, but Thompson wasn't about to publicly blame a sponsor. Either way, the car couldn't complete the second pass. The record was unofficial. Mickey Thompson was the fastest man alive, and the record books wouldn't acknowledge it. That's the kind of detail that would destroy most people. Thompson just shrugged, talked to the press, and started planning his next move. Because he wasn't done, not even close. He took the fame from Bonneville and turned it into a career that touched virtually every corner of motorsports. In 1962, he entered 3 cars at the Indianapolis 500. And these weren't normal Indy cars. They were rear-engined, running stock Buick V-eights. Every other car in the field was front-engined with a race-tuned Offenhauser, the engine that had dominated Indianapolis for decades. Nobody used stock engines at Indy. The establishment thought Thompson was insane. He didn't care. Thompson's crew, led by Fritz Voigt, designed and built the cars in 120 days, working 12 to 14-hour shifts. Formula One champion Graham Hill tested one and flatly refused to race it, citing terrible handling. The cars had been designed around 12-inch wheels, but new rules required 15-inch tires, throwing the balance off. Thompson entered them anyway. It was the first stock engine raced at Indianapolis since 1946. In 1963, he founded Mickey Thompson Performance Tires. He also started Mickey Thompson Equipment Company, making valve covers, headers, intake manifolds. By the mid-70s, his wide oval tires were on the back of every muscle car in America. In '64, he brought 3 more cars to Indy. Dave McDonald qualified 14th in Thompson's number 83 car. On the second lap, McDonald's car erupted in flames. He didn't survive. Thompson went back in '65, failed to qualify. He never returned. Quick thing. If you're still here, you're clearly the right audience for this. Subscribe if you want more deep dives like this. We do them every week. All right? In 1968, Thompson came back to Bonneville with a new weapon, Challenger 2. If Challenger 1 was a hot rod built in a garage, Challenger 2 was a surgical instrument. Designed by Carr Craft, assembled by a team of elite California hot rodders, it was a cigar-shaped twin-engine streamliner clad in 68 hand-formed aluminum panels. 2 Ford 427 cubic-inch V-eights, one in front of the cockpit, one behind. It was built in 5 months. Early testing showed speeds approaching 400 miles per hour. Everything was working. And then it rained. An unseasonal storm turned the Bonneville salt flats into a lake. The team couldn't run. They packed up, planning to come back the following year. But Ford pulled their sponsorship. No money, no record attempt. Challenger 2 went into storage. Mickey Thompson's dream of an official land speed record died on a rain-soaked salt flat. But Thompson didn't stop. He never stopped. In 1968, he and Danny Ongais took 3 Ford Mustang Mach-1s to Bonneville and set 295 speed and endurance records. Not a typo. 295 records in one trip. He won championships in 6 different categories of racing: off-road, midgets, sprint cars, sports cars, stock cars, and drag racing. He participated in over 10,000 races, drove over 1 million race miles. At the time of his death, he held 485 national and international speed and endurance records, more than any other person in history. In 1969, Thompson discovered off-road racing. He teamed up with Danny Ongais for the Baja 1000 in a Bill Stroppe-prepared Ford F-100 pickup. He'd never raced off-road before. He was a salt flat and drag strip guy, pavement and packed earth. The desert was a different world entirely. Rocks, silt beds, washed-out trails that disappeared without warning. It didn't matter. He fell in love. His son Danny later said it was all his father talked about after that first race. It consumed him. By 1973, Thompson had founded SCORE International, the sanctioning body that still oversees the biggest off-road races in North America, including the Baja 500 and the Baja 1000. The man heard about a type of racing, tried it once, and within 4 years was running the entire sport. The Mexican government asked him to step in after issues with the previous sanctioning body. Thompson spent months mapping courses across the Baja Peninsula, negotiating with local officials, figuring out how to staff races across hundreds of miles of empty desert. His wife, Trudy, handled the logistics. When the workload got too heavy, he brought in Sal Fish to manage the day-to-day operations. Then Thompson went even further. With Trudy, he created the Mickey Thompson Entertainment Group. Take off-road racing, which normally happened in deserts where nobody could see it, and put it inside football stadiums. Short course, tight turns, big jumps, roaring engines, dirt flying into the front rows. Trudy handled the business. Mickey handled the spectacle. It worked. They were filling stadiums across the country. By the mid-'80s, Mickey Thompson was one of the biggest names in American motorsports. Driver, engineer, promoter, tire manufacturer, off-road pioneer. He'd built an empire from a chalk outline on a garage floor, and he was restless. The land speed record was still out there. Challenger 2 was sitting in storage. Now let's talk about the engineering for a moment. Because what Thompson did with Challenger 1 remains one of the most audacious things anyone has ever attempted in a garage. In late 1987, with retirement approaching, Mickey started thinking about Challenger 2 again. The wheel-driven land speed record hadn't increased by a single mile per hour since the Summers brothers captured it in 1965. Mickey still believed Challenger 2 was the fastest wheel-driven vehicle ever built. His health was declining, but his stubbornness wasn't. He called his son Danny, who was by then a successful racing driver in his own right, and proposed a deal. Mickey would handle the engineering, Danny would drive. They'd go back to Bonneville together and finally get the record that had eluded Mickey for 3 decades. Danny agreed. Father and son started planning. It was early 1988. They had a car, a plan, and a partnership. They had everything they needed, except time. But before we get to what happened next, let's go back to the engineering. The tire problem alone would have stopped most people. In 1959, no tire existed that could handle 400 miles per hour. At that speed, centrifugal force tries to tear the rubber apart from the inside. Thompson went to Goodyear. They listened to his pitch and agreed to develop custom tires. Without those tires, the car doesn't leave the trailer. The engine layout was pure Thompson logic. 4 separate engines, 4 separate drivetrains, 4 driven wheels. If one engine failed, the other 3 could theoretically keep the car moving in a straight line. Each Pontiac 415 displaced about 6.8 liters. Naturally aspirated, they made around 400 horsepower each. With the superchargers added for the 1960 run, that jumped to roughly 700 per engine. The total output was somewhere around 2,800 horsepower. Through 4 transmissions originally designed for a 1937 Cadillac sedan. The aerodynamics were critical. At 400 miles per hour, air resistance isn't just a factor, it's the factor. Thompson designed the body with sweeping curves, a tapered nose, and a profile barely 39 inches tall at the cockpit. The driver sat essentially flat, looking out through a tiny windscreen, breathing through an oxygen mask because the cockpit filled with exhaust fumes. On an early run, the oxygen line malfunctioned. Thompson passed out from the fumes inside the car. His crew found him nearly unconscious, wedged into the roll cage so tightly he couldn't remove the canopy himself. After that, the oxygen system became the first thing they checked. The cooling was barely functional. At full speed, each engine was producing enough heat to melt its own components. The fuel system had to feed 4 separate engines simultaneously at wide-open throttle. 1 bad fuel line, 1 clogged filter, and the whole thing comes apart at 400 miles per hour. And he built this in his garage. In El Monte, California, no engineering degree, no wind tunnel. No computer simulations, slide rules, intuition, and stubbornness. Challenger 2 was a different animal entirely. Where Challenger 1 was a brute force hot rod, Challenger 2 was sophisticated. Carcraft, the same outfit that helped Ford build the GT40, designed the chassis. The aluminum body consisted of 68 hand-formed panels attached with Zeus fasteners. 2 Ford 427 engines, each producing around 900 horsepower, 32 feet long, 27 inches tall at the nose, all-wheel drive, with each engine powering 1 axle. When Danny Thompson restored it decades later, he swapped the Ford engines for 2 2,500 horsepower aluminum Hemis running on 87% nitromethane. The engines were dry blocks, no water cooling at all. The fuel provided all the cooling. A single run consumed around 50 gallons, and the car lost roughly 500 pounds during a pass just from burning fuel. The tires had only 1/32 of an inch of rubber. Any more would spin off from heat expansion at speed. That car eventually ran 450.9 miles per hour. the fastest piston-powered, wheel-driven vehicle in history. But Mickey never saw it. In the mid-1980s, Mickey Thompson entered a business partnership with a man named Michael Frank Goodwin. Goodwin had essentially invented Supercross, staging the first major indoor motocross race at the Los Angeles Coliseum in 1972. He brought a rock promoter's energy to motorcycle racing and turned it into a stadium spectacle. On paper, the partnership made sense. Thompson had stadium off-road racing. Goodwin had stadium motorcycle racing. Together, they'd dominate. It fell apart almost immediately. According to prosecutors, Goodwin had been planning to cheat Thompson from the start. Their personalities clashed violently. Thompson, a self-made man who'd built everything with his own hands, didn't tolerate being cheated, and he was not someone you wanted as an enemy. Within months, Thompson realized money was disappearing, significant money. He sued. A judge found that Goodwin had stolen more than $500,000 and ordered him to repay more than $768,000. Goodwin refused to pay. The case went to appeal after appeal. The California Supreme Court upheld the ruling. 2 weeks after that final ruling, Mickey and Trudy Thompson were dead. March 16, 1988, around 6 in the morning. Bradbury, California, a gated community about 24 miles from downtown Los Angeles. Mickey opened the garage door for Trudy to pull her car out. As he walked toward his own vehicle, 2 hooded men appeared from near the front gate. They'd been waiting. They shot Mickey, then dragged him into the driveway. One gunman went after Trudy as she backed out. He killed her. Then he walked back up the driveway and shot Mickey in the head. The 2 men fled on bicycles. A neighbor was startled awake by gunshots, then silence, then screaming. Mickey Thompson, screaming. Then nothing. On the bodies of Mickey and Trudy Thompson, investigators found about $500 in cash and $70,000 worth of jewelry. Nothing was stolen. This wasn't a robbery. This was an execution. The investigation stalled almost immediately. Police suspected Goodwin from the start. Multiple people reported hearing him say he'd have Thompson killed, that he was too smart to get caught, that Thompson would never see a dime. A former police commander named Bill Wilson, the man who'd introduced Thompson and Goodwin, testified that Goodwin had looked him in the eye and said he was going to take Mickey out. Wilson told him nobody wins that one. Goodwin said he was joking. He wasn't laughing. But suspecting someone and proving it are different things. Goodwin had an alibi. His car had been spotted near the Thompson home before the killing, but that wasn't enough. No fingerprints, no DNA, no weapon, no identified shooters. What investigators did find was a money trail. Goodwin and his wife had bought $275,000 in gold coins 2 months before the killings and wired $400,000 to offshore banks. 5 months after the murders, they left the country on their yacht. Didn't come back for over 2 years. Not exactly the behavior of an innocent man. The case went cold. Years passed. A decade. Then another. Mickey Thompson's sister, Collene Campbell, refused to let it die. She hired private investigators. She offered a $1 million reward. She appeared on America's Most Wanted. Collene was no stranger to violence. Her own son, Scott, had been murdered years earlier, his body dumped into the Pacific Ocean. She'd helped solve that case herself. She was a former councilwoman, a former mayor. She knew how the system worked, and she was not about to give up on her brother. Slowly, witnesses came forward. About 15 people eventually testified that they'd heard Goodwin threaten to kill Thompson. One witness claimed Goodwin had confessed to the murders a decade after they happened. Another said he'd seen Goodwin scouting the Thompson neighborhood through binoculars. In 2001, prosecutors brought the case to an Orange County grand jury. They declined to indict. In 2004, charges were filed in Los Angeles County. In October 2006, a Pasadena Superior Court judge ordered Goodwin to stand trial. The trial was entirely circumstantial. No murder weapon, no forensic evidence, no identified gunman. Just witness after witness who had heard Goodwin say he was going to kill Mickey Thompson. The prosecution's case was built on memories and patterns of behavior, not physical evidence. The defense argued that being a jerk didn't make someone a murderer. The prosecution argued that the pattern of threats, the financial maneuvering, the flight from the country, and the timing all pointed to one conclusion. On January 4, 2007, the jury found Michael Goodwin guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. At his sentencing, Goodwin said he couldn't apologize because he wasn't guilty. He's currently in the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego. Every appeal has been denied. In 2015, a 3-judge appellate panel acknowledged the lack of direct evidence, but called the circumstantial case overwhelming. The 2 gunmen who actually pulled the triggers have never been identified, never been found, never been charged. The murder case took 19 years to resolve. That's almost as long as Mickey Thompson's entire racing career. A man who held more speed records than any human being in history, who fundamentally changed drag racing, off-road racing, land speed racing, and tire technology, who built a 4-engine land speed car in his garage with junkyard parts, was killed over a business dispute worth less than $1 million. Today, Mickey Thompson's legacy is everywhere, even if most people don't know it. Mickey Thompson Tires and Wheels is now a subsidiary of Goodyear. Score International still runs the Baja races he organized. The Christmas tree starting lights he invented are at every drag strip on the planet. Stadium truck racing, the thing he and Trudy created, evolved into the events that millions watch today. He's been inducted into 4 different halls of fame, all posthumously. Challenger 1 sits on display at the World of Speed Museum in Oregon, its body panels pulled back to reveal those 4 Pontiac engines that carried a newspaper pressman past 400 miles per hour. It looks like something from another era. Because it is. No computer designed it. No wind tunnel shaped it. A man drew it on his garage floor with chalk. And Challenger 2? That story has an ending Mickey would have loved. After the murders, Danny Thompson packed up his father's car and put it in storage. He didn't look at it for nearly 15 years. He retired from racing in '95 and moved to Colorado. But the Salt Flats have a way of calling people back. In 2003, Danny was invited to drive a restored Streamliner at Bonneville. Something clicked. In 2010, Mickey Thompson Tires sent a trailer to Colorado to bring Challenger 2 to California. Danny and his team spent years restoring it. Much of the original car remained. The aluminum chassis, the 68 hand-formed body panels. But the engines were new. 2 2,500 horsepower aluminum Hemis running on nitromethane. In 2017, Danny set a 2-way record of 406.8 miles per hour, 1/10 faster than his father's historic run. Almost the same speed in the same car nearly 60 years later. Danny wasn't satisfied. He came back in 2018, and on August 12th, at the Bonneville Salt Flats, he drove Challenger 2 to 448.757 miles per hour. Official. 2-way average. The fastest piston-powered, wheel-driven vehicle in history. He'd hit 450.9 on one of the passes, in a car his father had designed in 1968, on tires with his father's name on them. Danny Thompson finished what his father started, in the same car, on the same salt, 50 years later. When people told Danny the conviction of Goodwin should have given him closure, he was blunt about it. He said closure would have been his dad sitting there instead. Nothing about a prison sentence brings someone back. The car went to record speed, the record went into the books, and the empty seat in the grandstand stayed empty. The thing about Mickey Thompson is that he didn't fit any category. He wasn't just a driver. He wasn't just an engineer. He wasn't just a promoter or a businessman or a tire manufacturer. He was all of those things simultaneously, often on the same day, sometimes on no sleep. He designed the first slingshot dragster and the starting lights for the Strip. He took stock engines to Indianapolis and off-road trucks to Baja. He chalked a car on a garage floor and drove it faster than anyone had ever gone. He worked the night shift at a newspaper to pay for it. He set 485 records and died in his driveway at 59 years old because his business partner couldn't accept losing a lawsuit. That's the story of Mickey Thompson, the Speed King. The man who could build anything, drive anything, promote anything. The man who was never, not once, fast enough to outrun what was coming. And there you have it. If you knew Mickey, knew someone who knew him, or have ever seen Challenger 1 in person, drop it in the comments. And if you made it this far, you already know what to do. Subscribe. We do this every week.